Focus stacking is an essential concept that you need to understand if you want to create images that are sharp from front to back. In this video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do a focus stack without needing a tripod. If you have a tripod, that's a bonus, of course, but you don't need a tripod to do a focus stack, contrary to popular belief. If you guys are new here, my name is Austin James Jackson. I'm a professional landscape photographer. Today, I'm out in the beautiful landscape here in Arizona, capturing some great images. Now, I want to do a focus stack for this one particular reason, because I'm close to a subject or an element in my frame and I'm far from another one. So in this example, I'm going to show you guys how I would focus stack this cactus right here with this mountain in the background. So first things first, let's look at a few camera settings that you need to set up in order to start your focus stack. So there's a few settings that you're going to want to change here before we start. So push the function button on your camera. Mine is located right here. It should say like FN or something like that. Most cameras should have that option. That'll bring up all of your settings right here that you can adjust. Now, first thing you'll want to adjust is change the drive mode. I put that in single shooting if you're not shooting on a tripod. And for this technique, you'll want it in single shooting. If you are using a tripod, put it in 2-second. Hit the function button again, scroll over, focus mode. You're gonna want autofocus single shot. It's gonna be what we want. It's up on the top there. And then one more time, hit the function button and then change the focus area. Now for the focus area for this shot, we're gonna want flexible spot large. If you have it, you can potentially do zone if you don't, but flexible spot large is the best. Now flexible spot large, you can see my focus point is now that box in the center. I can move it around with this joystick on my camera, and I can also use the touch screen feature. So hopefully your camera either has this joystick or it has the touch screen. If not, you can of course hit the function button again, hit focus area, and then it should let you move that point again. So we're gonna wanna be somewhere like F11 to F13. That's gonna give us the best results when we do this. Then you're gonna adjust your other settings accordingly. Obviously, if you have a tripod, just set your ISO to 100 and then put your camera on the tripod and adjust the shutter speed accordingly. If you don't have a tripod, you're gonna wanna keep that shutter speed about 1/30th or 1/40th at the slowest. Of course, go faster if you are able to because there's enough light outside. Now, we've got our settings completely dialed in. You can see my flexible spot focus point is that red box right there, which I can move around using the joystick, which is how I'm going to achieve this focus stack. Now, let me show you guys exactly how I do this, focusing on this cactus here. So one other thing to note before we get started is that the more overlapping objects you have, the more difficult the focus stack is gonna be. So you don't want a ton of overlapping objects, meaning I don't wanna get really low on this cactus because then I'm gonna have the mountains behind it and it's gonna be a huge pain in order to focus stack. Of course, it can be done, but it is more difficult to get a really clean result. So if you want a clean result, I recommend getting higher than your subject and shooting down onto it. That's gonna give you a much easier focus stack in the end when you're gonna go to blend it in Photoshop. So now we're in position to take the shot. You wanna hold as steady as possible. You can see on my screen, I've got the focus point in the middle. Now on a lot of cameras, you have this joystick right here, which allows you to kind of move the point around, or some cameras have a touch screen. I like to use the joystick. If you don't, it is gonna be a little bit more difficult for you. You'll have to hit the function and hit the focus area and then adjust the focus area every time. But if you do have the joystick or a touch screen, just use that. So you're gonna select the closest to you spot first, which is gonna be this cactus, and I'm going to take a photo. Then I'm gonna quickly move this to a more mid-ground spot, take a photo, and then move it to a background spot and take a photo. Now I'll be able to blend those really easily together. I kept pretty steady. You can review the images. You wanna make sure they're as close as possible, which these ones are looking pretty good. So now I have those images. Now I can go load them into Photoshop and blend them together. Take a lot of exposures, especially if you're not using a tripod, just to make sure that you have the images close enough together. You need them to be relatively close, but they don't have to be super, super close, because I'm gonna show you guys exactly how we can align those images in Photoshop. But now with this video is going to jump over to the Photoshop section. So let's go ahead and head to my office. Okay, so I'm here in Lightroom. If you're not a Lightroom user, don't worry. I'm just gonna show you how you would do this if you were a Lightroom user to load the images into Photoshop. But if you're not a Lightroom user, just go ahead and load them as layers straight into Photoshop right off the bat. If you are a Lightroom user though, it is nice. Find your images. I have my 3 photos shot here. These were the 3 that I shot that morning. And enable the profile corrections, remove the chromatic aberration, and just do that on all 3. And make sure you do it on all 3 so that all 3 look similar. And that's an optional step. It's something that I like to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab all three of these images. So I'm going to have the furthest right one selected. I'm going to hold shift and click on the furthest one to the left. Then I'm going to control click or right click, and I'm going to go to edit in, and I'm going to open as layers in Photoshop. That's going to take just a second to load out, but that's going to load all three of these as layers so we can already start working with them. So it's really quick and easy. Okay, now that we're in Photoshop, I'll show you guys first the trick that makes it so that you don't necessarily have to use a tripod to do this. Because if we try and align these now, you can see that they are slightly off. The images are slightly in a different spot each time. But we're going to align these images. So I'm going to shift click so I can select all of them there. We're going to go to edit. We're going to go to auto align layers. We're going to do auto. You'll hit OK. That's going to take just a second to load out, and that should hopefully align the layers really well. Now, if I toggle these, you can see how basically everything is in the same spot. It's a slight amount of movement from something called focus breathing in the lens, but I'm not too concerned about it. It's good enough, especially for the sake of this video. So now we can go through and make our adjustments. Now, what I like to do is number these or name them so that I know which file each one is. So obviously we have one that's in focus a little closer, one further back, and then one even further back. So when I toggle the eyeballs here, you can see this layer that's showing right now is definitely the close focus. So we can call this foreground. Then we'll go to the next layer. We'll see if this cactus is in good focus anywhere. That photo looks pretty good. Yeah, so this is going to be the midground. And then when we go up here, you'll notice with the midground photo, the mountain is relatively sharp. It's probably sharp enough that we could do this with 2, but we took 3, and this photo here, this background is actually slightly sharper. Now this is personal preference, but what I like to do is drag the background to the bottom and the midground to the middle. So I like to do foreground on top, midground, then background. That is just the way that makes the most sense for me and the easiest way for me to paint things in. Now we're going to go ahead and do the focus stack. So we've got our foreground. We want to paint in what is sharp on this foreground image. You can toggle this and see, like, as you can kind of tell down here, the midground image is sharper than the foreground. So really the only place where the foreground image is better is this really, really close cactus in the front here. So you can go in and hit your layer mask button. Now, if you do that, it's going to create a white layer mask, and we're going to paint out what we don't want from this, which is going to take quite some time to paint black because we really just need to paint in this very central spot. So instead, hold Alt and Option, which is one key, like the Alt or Option key or Alt Option key, and click. That will create a black layer mask. Now, nothing is showing through on this foreground layer. Now I can grab my brush. I'm going to make it a pretty big size, 0% hardness, and I'm just going to start painting this in. You can see that, unfortunately, because there is a little bit of focus breathing, I'm not going to get the absolute best results using one of these cacti. To do a focus stack is like one of the most difficult things because you have, like I mentioned, these overlapping objects. You can see how the background back here overlaps with this. So it's really hard to get a totally perfect focus stack. Hopefully you guys are doing a focus stack of like a rock or something that's a little bit simpler with a little less detail or overlapping elements. And if you notice that, like, you paint over and now you're noticing it's not as sharp anymore, just Command Z to undo. I'm going to make this brush a little bit smaller because I want to hit a little bit in here. And yeah, that's getting less sharp. Do that. And you can see it's probably not perfect, but it's good enough for me. Now, I always like to look at what I've created here just to make sure that it makes sense. You don't want any holes unless there's actually like a hole in that spot in the image. So I would go through, and to show that, by the way, I hit the Alt Option button and clicked. That'll show you the layer mask. I'm just going to fill in these spots. Now that's looking pretty good. Now we can go through on the midground, and we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to Alt Option, I'm going to click that there. And then I'll show you guys a trick on the midground here, because it is relatively like a nice gradient going back in terms of things get further away as we go back in the scene. What we're going to do with our midground here is just use a gradient. It's going to be so much easier. You're going to want to make sure you're on basics for the gradient. You're going to want black to white. I like to use classic gradient, but you can use the regular gradient if you'd like. Change it to gradient if you're on classic gradient, and then you can click and drag. If it's dragging a circle like that, it's because you're on radial. You want to be on linear for this. So I'm going to drag somewhere like that. Now, when I hold Alt and Option and click on this, you can see we've got black on the bottom under this gradient and white on the top, and in between black and white between there. So keep in mind, this works just the same as if we used a brush, like a layer mask. So we are essentially masking out what's on bottom, masking in what's on top. That's actually the opposite of what we want to do. So we're going to hit Command Z to invert that. And then we're going to click and drag from the top like that. Now, you don't want it to be super, super feathered on the focus stack like this, but you do want a little bit of feather, probably about right there. And then you can drag this in. Now it's nice if you click back on the image, you can still adjust the gradient like this and somewhere like that. Now, yes, there is certainly way more accurate ways you could do this if you wanted to come in here with a brush, but I did want to show you this just for sake of this video and to not spend so much time, because I could really spend a lot of time doing this. So now you can see we've got everything in focus. And then you can see the background is supplying us with everything. When I toggle the background layer now, this is what is being provided by these two layers. The background would be providing everything else. Now you can see that there might be like a few touch-up spots that I want to hit, but otherwise mountain is in focus. Come down here, midground's in focus, cactus is in focus, and close-up cactus is in focus. So again, there is some stuff you could probably go back and touch up a little bit of this in here, but with the needles on the cactus here, it is a huge pain, and I'm not going to bore you touching this up. But if this is you and you are going to do this, go back through, just look at everything up close, look at what needs to be touched up and fix it up so that it looks really good. Otherwise, that's how you go ahead and do a focus stack. As you can see, I did it without a tripod. If you have a steady hand, using that auto align tool is going to be really easy and not difficult. You're going to be able to do that no problem, in my opinion. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments. Otherwise, make sure you like and subscribe so that you can see my videos every week. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.